Well, from a wildscape to wildflowers, we're going to be talking about native plants and how you can use them in the landscape with Andrea DeLong-Amaya from the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center.
Hello.
And Andrea, I always say welcome back to the show. You're one of our regular guests. It's always great to see you.
I love being here. Thank you.
All right. Well, we have some fun things to talk about today, and we're focusing kind of on the utility of some of these plants. But there are a lot of beautiful, graceful plants that we can use for useful purposes, right?
Absolutely. Some of the ones that that I brought in and I want to talk about was for screening.
Right.
We talked about, I know we get a lot of questions where people are looking for screens, especially in shady spots.
Yeah.
And so there were a couple of things that I think work really well for that.
Right.
There's the wax myrtle,
Right.
which I love to use because it's a real dense, dark green plant with a real fine texture. It's a nice even texture in the backdrop.
Okay. Well, you actually did bring a wax myrtle, so let's. We have a small one here in the studio, and this is a plant that a lot of people have been using here in the Central Texas area for some time. I like it because, unlike a lot of the stiff ornamental evergreens, this one gives you a sense of motion.
Yeah, it's more pliable.
Yeah,
Sure.
when when the wind blows, even the slight breeze, you get a lot of movement on this plant. Mm-hmm. And it is evergreen and gets pretty tall too, right?
Yeah, so there's the standard, you can limb them up and have them be more like a standard tree or a multi-trunk tree. You can hedge them and keep them denser if you don't let them get too tall and woody.
Right.
There's a dwarf wax myrtle, which still gets fairly big, but it's a little more compact and dense.
Right.
So, you can do different things with them, which I like. And then they smell good.
Yeah, yeah, it's got a nice aromatic quality
The foliage
to it.
and the fruit are
Right,
really
and
fragrant.
pretty little fruit. It's like a miniature blueberry.
Yeah, not showy, but nice to see.
Right, right. Well, while we're on the topic of the evergreen shrubs, Yaupon holly is another one that is really kind of hard to beat if you're talking about screening plants.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, oh, Yaupon, it's an overused native, but for a good reason.
Yeah, it's super hardy, very robust plant. It's easy to grow in a wide variety of conditions, shade, sun. Again, like the wax myrtle, you can limb it up and have it be a beautiful specimen tree, a multi-trunk tree, or you can shear it and keep it more like a hedge.
Yeah. The first prune topiary plants in North America? Yaupon holly. English use them in their formal gardens in Jamestown Colony.
Yeah, they clip very well.
Yeah.
And then you get the red berries on them, and
Right,
that's a
right.
nice little added benefit. So, yeah, they're overused perhaps, but like you said, rightly so. I think they have a really good purpose. Then there's the dwarf yaupon, which stays really short. And
my
can
favorite,
evolve.
the weeping yaupon.
Yes, those are cool. Yeah.
They are very cool, yeah. So don't forget about the Yaupon holly and Ilex vomitoria, very colorful name. We won't go into that.
That's another story.
It's another story, right. You brought one that we have never talked about before on the show. And I remember this from my days stomping around in the big thicket in East Texas, but I know it also grows in Central Texas in the canyons like at Hamilton's Pool or West Cave. And this is a red bay. And it's Persea, I remember it's the first name of the Persea
Borbonia.
Borbonia,
Yeah.
right. And this is, I love these plants, and it's very aromatic. Speaking of aromatic, it is related to the bay leaf that you cook with, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. And that one, you don't see it commercially available very often, but it's a beautiful plant. You can see the leaves are really glossy, dark green, have a nice texture to the plant. They like deeper soils with a little bit of extra water. They're not going to be a xeric garden kind of plant, but most regular garden settings would be just fine for it.
Well, I'm real curious to see how it would perform in Central Texas, so I'm going to officially encourage people to try it. Now, this is probably going to be available, speaking of, this is not one that you're going to find in your chain store, but it probably will be available during the plant sale.
We'll have some available at the plant sale, in April.
And we'll tell people more about that at the end of the interview. But it's going to be a big deal, and I think I'm going to have to get a couple of those.
Good.
So we've talked about screening with evergreen shrubs, but a lot of people have tight spaces they need screening in, and that's where the native vines come in.
Yeah, so, there's some great ones that yeah, when you really have a tight spot and you can't fit something like a Yopon, to have some kind of evergreen vine. And I believe Daphne's going to be talking about the Carolina Jessamine later in the show, and that's a wonderful one with real fragrant.
Obvious choice, yeah.
Yeah, really lovely plant. And then there's the crossvine, which is also pretty common already used, but again, it's just, there's a good reason for it. It's evergreen, it's very floriferous, it's a good hummingbird attracting plant, a lot of benefits to that. It'll grow in shade or sun. So it's very versatile.
It will grow just about
anywhere.
That's true. It's a tad rambunctious.
Yes. Yeah, and give it plenty of space and something sturdy to grow on, because it'll pull down one of those little wimpy trellises. You need a big, substantial trellis.
A real he vine trellis. Yeah. So those are some of the obvious choices. Less obvious choices, but plants that really deserve our attention are the native clematis. These are incredible flowers. Absolutely love these plants, and there are three that you want to highlight.
Yeah, so one of them is the purple leather flower, and it's called leather flower because the petals are very tough, kind of leathery, in a purpley color, and they're really cute. They curl out and they look like they're going to open up more, but they don't. Don't wait for them to open up much, because they kind of look more like a tulip, like a lily tulip.
Yeah, like a tulip that hangs down.
That's hanging down, with the little curl on the edge of the petals. And that's a very sweet one. Again, it'll grow in shade or sun. It likes regular average soil, good drainage. And then there's the scarlet leather flower, which is closely related. It looks very similar, but it has a red flower, and it doesn't, the curls on the petals don't curl as much on the standard native form. But what's interesting about that one is that the scarlet leather flower is used as a parent plant for a lot of the hybrids that have been created in England, and have, like one we were talking about,
Duchess of Albany, which is available in local shops often, and is a phenomenal little vine.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's sweet. So there are a lot of cultivars that you can find of that one, but the true native one is really hard to find in cultivation, and I believe we'll have some at our plant sale. And
there's the old man's beard as well.
The old man's beard is a really fun one. And I don't see people ever plant that on purpose, but sometimes it'll show up. And if you do have access to it, and I believe we'll have some of those for sale as well, it's a cool plant. The flowers aren't particularly showy, but the seed heads are really, that's where the name Old Man's Beard comes from. They're really fluffy and
you see them all over the hill country.
Late summer and into the fall is probably its best time to see them.
So those are plants for the narrow spaces, and vines are perfect for that. Another thing that we want to talk about are ground covers, and you've brought a couple of plants I don't think we've ever mentioned before for different kinds of purposes. Now you are using these in lots of different ways at the Wildflower Center, but let's talk about these two different species that we have here. This is called wavy cloak fern or silver cloak fern, and I'm told by you, and I should believe this because you're the expert, this is a fern for the sun.
Yes, it's what we call a xerophytic fern. It loves the dry conditions. And I love telling people, especially from the east, that we have actually a wider range of species that occur in West Texas than we do in East Texas, that the plants that really like the dry.
Me.
Yes. But they tend to be shorter in stature and kind of silvery. And they have this other feature that's interesting. You can see some of the fronds here are curled up. It's like a resurrection fern. When it's dry, they curl up. And then when it rains, they rehydrate and open, and they're more green again. So it does that. But it's really beautiful, contrasted with big boulders or a prickly pear cactus or something.
Love it. So, and as brief as we can be, Nimblewill is a Muhlenbergia, so we know it's one of the native grasses. Of course, this is in its winter shade of pale. But real briefly, what would you say about that one?
This is one that I just think works so well flat as a ground cover, or we've used it at the Wildflower Center in our tank garden where it's billowing over. It's kind of a frothy-looking green. It's very beautiful.
Okay, the plant sale, real briefly, it's coming up in the second weekend of April.
Yep.
And people can access all of the things that we're talking about here. And there's also a great, wonderful documentary coming up, Wildflower Seeds of History, that's going to be coming your way on KLRU and other PBS affiliates. So be watching for that. Andrea, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure.
All right. Take care. And coming up next, it's Daphne.